Red Hollow's richest son bids 500 in gold to save a Shoshone woman from the auction block. But will love prove stronger than prejudice, or will the past come hunting them both? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The dust hung thick in the air of Red Hollow, a town where saloons outnumbered schools 3-1 and where the law bent with every dollar that changed hands. The morning sun beat down on the wooden platform set up in the town square where a small crowd had gathered for the weekly auction. Saraya stood barefoot on the rough wooden boards, her dark hair falling in waves down her back. At 22, her face showed no fear, though inside her heart pounded like a wild horse. She was of the Shoshone people, captured 2 winters ago when settlers raided her village, claiming they needed to clear the land. Since then, she'd been passed between 3 different ranches, each owner crueler than the last, before ending up on this auction block. The auctioneer, a portly man with a sweat-stained shirt and yellowed teeth, called out to the crowd. Next, up, we have this fine specimen of Indian labor. Strong back, good with horses, and can cook too. He grabbed Saraya's arm, but she jerked it away, keeping her head high and her eyes sharp as flint. The crowd murmured. A bit wild, the auctioneer chuckled nervously. But nothing a firm hand can't fix. The paperwork says indentured labor, gentlemen, perfectly legal. Saraya knew better. This was slavery wearing polite clothes. Do I hear? $50. $50 for this strong young woman. 50, called a rancher Saraya recognized as Tom Bailey, a man known for working his hands until they collapsed. 60, shouted another, a saloon owner with wandering hands and cruel eyes. The bidding continued, and Saraya felt her future narrowing with each call. These men didn't want a worker. They wanted something to break. $120 going. Once, the auctioneer raised his gavel. Going twice. Just as the gavel was about to fall, a clear voice called from the back of the crowd. $500. Gold. Every head turned. A path cleared as a young man walked forward. Saraya recognized him immediately, though they'd never spoken. Nathaniel Greaves, the son of Red Hollow's wealthiest banker. At 26, he had never set foot in a saloon, never raised his voice, and never once defied his father. Until that day. The crowd buzzed with shocked whispers. Nathaniel walked forward, his expensive boots stirring the dust. Unlike the other men, he removed his hat as he approached the platform, revealing neatly combed brown hair. He looked directly at Saraya, meeting her eyes without flinching. 500 in gold for the lady's papers, he repeated, his voice steady. The auctioneer's eyes widened. Well, that is sold to Mr. Nathaniel Greaves. After the payment was made and the papers changed hands, Nathaniel approached Saraya where she waited by the platform. He kept a respectful distance. No one owns you now. Not even me, he said softly, so only she could hear. But I'd like to take you somewhere safe, and I'd like to ask you someday if a girl like you could love a man like me. Saraya said nothing. She'd heard smooth words before, been rescued only to be resold when the novelty wore off. But there was something different in Nathaniel's eyes, something genuine that made her hesitate. My family's old ranch house is on the edge of town, he continued. You'd have your own room with a lock on the door. The key would be yours alone. Why? Saraya spoke for the first time, her voice rough from disuse. Nathaniel looked surprised at the question. Because it's the right thing to do. There's always a price, she said flatly. Not this time, he answered. You're free to leave whenever you wish. I'll give you enough money to get wherever you want to go. Saraya studied him, trying to find the lie in his face. Finding none, she gave a single nod. The walk through town was a gauntlet of stares and whispers. Nathaniel kept a proper distance from Saraya, but it didn't stop the speculation in the eyes that followed them. Nathaniel Greaves, what is the meaning of this? A tall, imposing man with grey at his temples and cold eyes blocked their path. Edward Greaves, Nathaniel's father, and owner of the only bank in Red Hollow. Father, Nathaniel nodded respectfully, but didn't stop walking. I'll explain later. You'll explain now. Edward grabbed his son's arm. Why are you parading this savage through town? Have you lost your mind? Saraya's eyes flashed, but she remained silent, watching. Miss Saraya is my guest, Nathaniel said calmly, removing his father's hand from his arm, "and I won't have her insulted." Edward's face reddened. "Guest? You mean you've bought yourself an Indian whore? What will Elizabeth's family think? You're engaged to be married in 3 months." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "I've purchased Miss Soraya's freedom papers. Nothing more. She's under my protection until she decides where she wishes to go. Now, if you'll excuse us, it's been a long morning." He guided Soraya around his father, whose face had gone from red to nearly purple. "This isn't over, Nathaniel," Edward called, after them. "You come to your senses and get rid of her by sundown, or there will be consequences." The old ranch house sat on a gentle rise at the edge of town, with views of the mountains to the west. It was smaller than Soraya expected, given the Greaves family's wealth, but well-maintained, with a wide porch and blue shutters. "My mother loved this place," Nathaniel explained as he unlocked the door. "After she died, Father built the big house in town, but he couldn't bring himself to sell this one. No one's lived here for years except me sometimes when I need peace and quiet." The inside was simple but comfortable, with worn but quality furniture. Dust covers had been hastily removed, suggesting Nathaniel had prepared the house before coming to the auction. "Your room is upstairs, first door on the right," he said, handing her a small brass key. "There's a washroom at the end of the hall. I've had some clothes delivered. Nothing fancy, just practical things. I hope they fit." Soraya took the key, her fingers closing around it tightly. "And where will you sleep?" "In town, at my father's house," Nathaniel replied. "I won't stay here unless you're comfortable with it. Even then, I'd take the room downstairs." Soraya looked at him suspiciously. "Men don't buy women for $500 in gold just to give them a key and leave." Nathaniel's face reddened slightly. "I didn't buy you. I bought your papers so I could tear them up." As if to prove his point, he pulled the indentured servitude contract from his pocket and ripped it in half, then in quarters. "You're free, Soraya, truly free." She watched the pieces flutter to the floor. "Freedom has no meaning when you look like me in a town like this. Then we'll change the town," Nathaniel said simply. Soraya laughed for the first time, a short, harsh sound. "You're either a fool or the best liar I've ever met." "I've been called a fool before," he admitted with a small smile. "Never a good liar, though." A knock at the door interrupted them. Nathaniel opened it to find a young man with a wagon full of supplies. "The groceries you ordered, Mr. Greaves," the delivery boy said, eyeing Soraya curiously. "Thank you, Tommy. Please bring them in." Nathaniel tipped him generously. After the supplies were unloaded, enough food for weeks, Soraya noted, Nathaniel showed her how the stove worked and where everything was kept. "I should go into town and speak with my father," he said reluctantly. "Will you be all right here alone?" Soraya nodded. "I've been alone most of my life." Something flickered in Nathaniel's eyes, sadness perhaps. "I'll return tomorrow morning. Lock the doors." After he left, Soraya explored the house carefully, expecting to find some trap, some hint of his true intentions. Instead, she found books in the study, dried flowers pressed between glass frames, and a piano gathering dust in the corner of the sitting room. In her room, she discovered dresses, skirts, and blouses in her size, along with sturdy boots and a warm coat. She bathed for the first time in months, washing away the grime of the ranches and the auction block. As she dressed in clean clothes, she caught her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. That night, she slept in a real bed with the door locked, the key clutched in her hand. She expected nightmares. She always had them, but instead dreamed of mountains and open skies. Meanwhile, in town, Nathaniel faced his father's wrath in the imposing study of the Greaves mansion. "You've embarrassed this family for the last time," Edward thundered, pounding his fist on his desk. "First you refused to join the board at the bank, insisting on working with those farmers on their irrigation problems, and now this." "She was being sold like an animal, father," Nathaniel said quietly. "What would you have had me do?" "Let someone else buy her. What do you care about one Indian girl? She has a name. It's Soraya." Edward's eyes narrowed. "I've already had a visit from Harold Whitmore. Elizabeth is in tears. Her father is threatening to cancel the engagement." "Then let him," Nathaniel said, surprising himself with how little he cared. Edward stared at his son as if seeing him for the first time. You would throw away a match with the Whitmore family? All that land, all those connections for a savage? Don't call her that. Nathaniel's voice had an edge to it now. And yes, I would. Elizabeth doesn't love me. She loves the idea of being. Mrs. Greaves? Love? Edward scoffed. Marriage isn't about love, it's about building something that lasts. Like you and Mother built, Nathaniel countered. Edward's face went white. Don't you dare bring her into this. Mother would have understood what I did today. Your mother was a gentle soul who didn't understand the realities of this world, Edward snapped. Just like you. Just like your brother, before he got himself killed with his foolish ideals. The mention of his brother hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. David had been everything Nathaniel wasn't. Bold, charismatic, their father's clear favorite, until he died in a duel defending a woman's honor 5 years ago. David would have done the same thing I did, Nathaniel said quietly. And he'd be just as wrong, Edward roared. I'm giving you 1 week, Nathaniel. 1 week to come to your senses. Send that girl on her way with some money if your conscience demands it. Then apologize to the Whitmores and beg Elizabeth to take you back, or I'll cut you off without a penny to your name. I have Mother's inheritance, Nathaniel reminded him. A pittance compared to what you stand to lose, Edward warned. Think carefully, son. The next morning, Nathaniel returned to the ranch house with fresh bread and news. The whole town's talking, he told Soraya as they sat at the kitchen table. My father's furious. The Whitmores have officially cancelled my engagement to Elizabeth, and half the town thinks I've lost my mind. And the other half? Soraya asked, breaking off a piece of bread. They think I bought you for my bed, he said bluntly, his cheeks colouring. I've denied nothing because arguing only makes gossip worse. But I want you to know that's not why I did this. Then why did you? Her dark eyes studied him intently. Nathaniel looked out the window at the mountains. 2 years ago, I was riding in the hills and came across the aftermath of a raid on an Indian village. I was too late to help. When I saw you on that auction block, looking so proud despite everything, I couldn't be too late again. Soraya was silent for a long moment. It was my village, she finally said. The one you found. Nathaniel's eyes widened. How do you know? There was a massacre of my people 2 winters ago. Few survived. Her voice was flat, emotionless. I was gathering herbs in the forest when they came. I heard the screams. When I returned, everyone was dead or taken. My sister. She stopped, unable to continue. Nathaniel reached across the table as if to take her hand, then thought better of it. I'm sorry, more than I can say. Your sorrow doesn't bring them back, she said, but without anger. No, he agreed, it doesn't. The days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Nathaniel would come in the mornings, bringing supplies or books or news from town. Sometimes he stayed to help with repairs around the house. Other times he had business to attend to, mostly with local farmers who relied on his engineering knowledge to improve their irrigation systems. Soraya found herself watching for his arrival each day, though she told herself it was merely because he was her only connection to the outside world. She began working in the overgrown garden behind the house, recognizing many of the plants from her childhood. A week after the auction, Nathaniel arrived looking troubled. My father's ultimatum expires today, he explained. He wants me to send you away and beg Elizabeth to take me back. And will you? Soraya asked, her face carefully blank. No, Nathaniel said simply. But it means things might get difficult. Father controls most of the business in town. He can make life unpleasant for both of us. I'm used to unpleasant, Soraya said, turning back to the carrots she was pulling from the garden. You shouldn't have to be, Nathaniel said softly. That afternoon, as predicted, Edward Greaves arrived at the ranch house in his fine carriage. Soraya watched from the window as father and son argued on the front porch. Though she couldn't hear the words, the elder Greaves's red face and wild gestures told the story clearly enough. When Edward finally left, Nathaniel remained on the porch, his shoulders slumped. Soraya brought him a glass of water and for the first time sat beside him voluntarily. He's cut me off, Nathaniel said after a long silence. No access to family funds beyond my mother's inheritance. He's also spreading word that no one should do business with me. Because of me, Soraya stated. Because of his own pride, Nathaniel corrected. He can't stand that I won't bend to his will, just like he couldn't stand it when David defied him. David? My older brother. Nathaniel's voice grew distant. He died 5 years ago. Father's golden child. Until he wasn't. Soraya said nothing, but she moved slightly closer on the porch step. We have enough money to last a while, Nathaniel continued, and the farmers will still work with me. They never liked my father anyway. We'll be all right. We? Soraya raised an eyebrow. Nathaniel flushed. I meant, I don't expect you to stay. You're free to go whenever you want, I promised you that. Where would I go? She asked practically. My people are scattered or dead. This town hates me. The next town would be no different. You could go west, find another Shoshone village. Soraya shook her head. I'm between worlds now. Neither fully of my people nor of yours. Here at least I have... She stopped. What? Nathaniel prompted gently. A garden, she finished, not meeting his eyes. That evening, as dusk fell, Soraya heard the piano for the first time. Nathaniel played hesitantly, clearly out of practice, but the melody was sweet and sad. She stood in the doorway of the sitting room, watching his bent head as his fingers moved over the yellowed keys. My mother taught me, he said without turning around. This was her favorite song. It's beautiful, Soraya said. She was beautiful, Nathaniel replied. Not just her face, but her heart. She took in strays, animals, people, anyone who needed help. Father adored her for it until he didn't. After she died, he became harder. Grief changes people, Soraya said, thinking of her own losses. Nathaniel turned to look at her. Yes, it does. Some it makes kinder, some crueler. And you? What did grief make you? Quieter, he said after a moment's reflection. More careful, less willing to risk my heart. Until you spent $500 in gold on a stranger, Soraya pointed out. Nathaniel smiled slightly. Until... Then. The next day brought the first real test of the town's attitudes. Soraya needed supplies that weren't in the house, and Nathaniel had business with a farmer outside town. After much discussion, they decided to go into Red Hollow together. The stairs began the moment they rode into town in Nathaniel's wagon. Women pulled their children closer as they passed. Men stopped their conversations to watch, some with open hostility, others with lewd speculation in their eyes. At the general store, the owner, Mr. Peterson, greeted Nathaniel nervously. Morning, Mr. Greaves. How can I help you today? We need some supplies, Thomas, Nathaniel replied, handing over a list. Mr. Peterson glanced at Soraya, then back at the list. I'm not sure I can fill this order. Why not? Nathaniel asked, though he knew the answer. Well, your father was in yesterday, made it clear that extending credit to you would be unwise. I'm paying in cash, Nathaniel said firmly. Placing coins on the counter, Mr. Peterson hesitated, then began gathering the items on the list. No disrespect intended, Mr. Greaves. A man's got to think of his business. And his conscience, Nathaniel added quietly. While they waited, a well-dressed woman entered the store. Elizabeth Whitmore froze when she saw Nathaniel, her pretty face twisting with emotion. Nathaniel, she said coldly. I see the rumors are true. Elizabeth, he nodded politely. May I introduce Miss Soraya? Elizabeth ignored the introduction completely. Father says you've lost your mind, now I see he was right. She looked Soraya up and down with contempt. Was our engagement so unbearable that you'd rather disgrace yourself with a savage? Before Nathaniel could respond, Soraya stepped forward. The disgrace is not his, she said in a clear voice that carried through the now silent store. The disgrace belongs to those who see a human being and choose to look away. Elizabeth's face flushed red. How dare you speak to me, you... That's enough, Nathaniel cut in. We'll be going now, Mr. Peterson. Please deliver these items to the ranch house. Outside, Soraya's composure finally broke. Her hands trembled as she climbed into the wagon. I shouldn't have spoken, she said as they drove away. I've made things worse for you. No, Nathaniel said firmly. You spoke the truth, never apologize for that. As they passed the saloon, a group of men called out crude suggestions. Nathaniel's knuckles went white on the reins, but he kept driving. They think they know what I am, Soraya said quietly, what we are to each other. Let them think what they want, Nathaniel replied. We know the truth. But what was the truth, Soraya wondered as they rode back to the ranch house in silence. What was she to this quiet, determined man who had upended his life for her sake? And what was he becoming to her? That night, unable to sleep, Soraya stepped onto the porch and found Nathaniel sitting there staring at the stars. Couldn't sleep either, he asked, making room for her on the bench. I have bad dreams, she admitted, sitting beside him. About the raid? About my sister screaming my name as they took her? I'm sorry, Nathaniel said, his voice pained. I should have been there, Soraya continued, the words pouring out now. Maybe I could have saved her. Maybe I could have died with her. Instead, I was gathering plants in the forest, humming to myself like a child while my world burned. You can't blame yourself for surviving, Nathaniel said gently. Can't I? Soraya looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Every night I dream of her. Every night I hear her calling for me, and every night I fail her again. Without thinking, Nathaniel reached for her hand in the darkness. To his surprise, she didn't pull away. I dream of David too, he confessed. He died in a duel defending a woman's honor. Someone insulted her. David couldn't let it stand, and he was always better with words than with guns. He swallowed hard. Father loved him more than me, everyone did. He was everything I wasn't, brave, outspoken, charismatic. When he died, Father looked at me like the wrong son had survived. That's why you did it, isn't it? Soraya asked softly. Why you bought my contract. You're trying to be him. Nathaniel shook his head. No, I did it because it was right. Because for once in my life, I didn't want to be the man who stands silently in the corner while others suffer. They sat in companionable silence for a long time, their hands still joined. Can I ask you something? Nathaniel finally said. You can ask. That day at the auction, I said I'd like to know someday if a girl like you could love a man like me. He turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. I meant it. Can you ever see yourself loving a man like me? Soraya didn't answer with words. Instead, she reached out and took his other hand, holding both of his between her own. In that moment, under the vast sky filled with stars, they were just two people who understood grief, loneliness, and the ache of belonging. Nowhere. Two survivors finding unexpected comfort in each other's presence, and for the first time since the raid that took her people, Soraya felt something like hope stir in her heart. As spring settled over Red Hollow, the garden behind the ranch house came alive with color. Soraya spent her days coaxing vegetables from the soil and restoring the flower beds that had once been Nathaniel's mother's pride and joy. Her hands, once calloused from hard labor on ranches, now bore the gentler marks of gardening tools. Nathaniel had moved into the downstairs bedroom of the ranch house after the first month. It was a decision born of practicality. His father had locked him out of the family home, but it changed the rhythm of their days. Mornings began with shared coffee on the porch, watching the sun rise over the distant mountains. Evenings often ended the same way, with conversations that stretched into the night. The tomatoes will be ready soon, Soraya said one morning, accepting the cup Nathaniel handed her. She had grown more comfortable around him, no longer flinching when he moved too quickly or watching him with suspicious eyes. You've worked miracles with that garden, Nathaniel replied, taking his usual seat beside her on the porch steps. Mother would have been amazed. Tell me more about her, Soraya requested. She had come to enjoy his stories about his family, the good parts anyway. She loved music, Nathaniel said, smiling at the memory. She'd play the piano for hours. When I was very young, before David and I were sent to school, she'd teach us songs from her childhood. Father would come home and find the three of us singing around the piano, laughing. What happened to change him? Soraya asked, knowing from previous conversations that Edward Greaves had once been a different man. Nathaniel sighed. Business success, I think. The more wealth and power he accumulated, the more distant he became. Mother's death finished the transformation. She was the only one who could soften his edges. Soraya nodded thoughtfully. In my village, we believe that people need balance. Too much of anything, even success, can poison the spirit. Your people were wise, Nathaniel said. Not wise enough to see the danger coming, she replied, the familiar sadness crossing her face. Nathaniel had learned not to offer empty consolations when she spoke of her losses. Instead, he simply stayed present with her grief, acknowledging it without trying to fix it. After breakfast, Nathaniel prepared to leave for a meeting with farmers outside town. These days, his irrigation work was their primary source of income. Edward Greaves had made good on his threats, using his influence to close many doors to his son, but the independent farmers still valued Nathaniel's expertise. I should be back by sundown, he told Soraya as he saddled his horse. Will you be all right here alone? Though it had been months since the auction, Soraya rarely ventured into town without Nathaniel. The stares and whispers were too difficult to bear alone. I'll be fine, she assured him. I have plenty to do in the garden. As Nathaniel rode away, Soraya returned to her work among the plants. The simple rhythm of digging and weeding calmed her mind. She had just started pruning the rose bushes when she heard the sound of an approaching carriage. Looking up, she felt her body tense. Edward Greaves sat in his expensive carriage, driven by his personal coachman. The older man's face was set in grim lines as he descended and approached the garden. Miss Saria, he said stiffly, using her name for the first time since they'd met. I wish to speak with you. Soraya straightened, brushing dirt from her hands. Mr. Greaves, Nathaniel isn't here. I know. That's why I came now. Edward looked uncomfortable, out of place among the vegetables and flowers. May we speak inside? Reluctantly, Soraya led him into the house. She didn't offer him refreshment, and he didn't seem to expect any. I'll be direct, Edward said, standing rigidly in the sitting room. I want my son back. This situation has gone on long enough. I'm not keeping him here, Soraya replied evenly. He's free to return to you any time he wishes. Edward's jaw tightened. You've bewitched him somehow. The Nathaniel I raised would never defy me like this, would never throw away his future for... He stopped himself. For a savage? Soraya finished for him. Is that what you were going to say? For anyone, Edward amended, though his eyes said otherwise. Nathaniel has responsibilities, a position waiting at the bank, a future I've carefully built for him. Perhaps he wants to build his own future, Soraya suggested. Edward shook his head impatiently. He doesn't know what he wants. Nathaniel has always been impressionable, easily swayed by emotion rather than reason. You don't know your son very well, Soraya said quietly. The banker's face reddened. I've known him his entire life. You've known him for 3 months. And in those 3 months I've seen a man of principle and courage, Soraya countered. A man who thinks for himself. I didn't come here to debate my son's character with you, Edward snapped. Then, visibly collecting himself, he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. I came to make you an offer. He placed the envelope on the small table between them. There's $5,000 in there. More than enough for you to start a new life far from here. Perhaps find your people somewhere out west. Soraya stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. Take it and go, Edward continued. Today, while Nathaniel is out, leave him a note if you must, but make it clear you won't be coming back. You think I can be bought, Soraya said, her voice flat. Everyone has a price, Edward replied confidently. And frankly, this is far more than you're worth. Soraya's eyes flashed with anger. The only thing that has a price in this room is your conscience, Mr. Greaves, and it seems to be very cheap indeed. Edward's confidence faltered at her direct gaze. You're ruining his life, he tried again. The town talks of nothing else. His reputation is in tatters. Because of your doing, Soraya pointed out. You're the one spreading rumors and turning people against him. Because he's making a mistake. Edward's composure finally broke. My son could have had everything, the bank, the Whitmore connection, respect in society. Instead, he's living in this run-down house with an Indian woman, designing ditches for farmers who can barely pay him. And yet, he seems happier than he ever was in your grand house, Soraya observed. Edward stared at her for a long moment, then picked up the envelope. He'll come to his senses eventually. When he does, don't expect me to be so generous with my offer. After he left, Soraya returned to the garden, but her hands were shaking too badly to continue working. Edward's visit had unsettled her more. than she wanted to admit. Was she ruining Nathaniel's life? Would he be better off if she left? The questions plagued her for the rest of the day, and by the time Nathaniel returned at dusk, she had made a decision. "Your father came to see me," she told him as soon as he entered the house. Nathaniel's expression darkened. "What did he want?" "To buy me off," Soraya said bluntly. "He offered $5,000 if I would leave and never come back." "The nerve of that man," Nathaniel muttered, pacing the room. "I'm sorry, Soraya. Truly sorry. He believes I'm ruining your life," she continued, watching his reaction carefully. "Perhaps he's right." Nathaniel stopped pacing and turned to face her. "Is that what you think?" "I think you had a different future planned before I came along," she said honestly. "Her respectable wife, a position at the bank, your father's approval." "A gilded cage," Nathaniel corrected her. "Elizabeth didn't love me. She loved the idea of being Mrs. Nathaniel Greaves. The bank work bored me to tears. And as for my father's approval," he sighed. "I've never had that, not really. That was reserved for David." "Still," Soraya pressed, "you've given up so much and gained so much more," Nathaniel insisted, moving closer to her. "Soraya, these past months have been the first time in my life I've felt truly alive, working with the farmers, making something useful with my hands and mind, coming home to—" He stopped, looking suddenly uncertain. "To what?" she asked softly. "To you," he finished simply. "To our conversations, to seeing what new miracle you've worked in the garden, to knowing that when I walk through that door, there's someone who sees me for who I am, not who they want me to be." Soraya felt her resolve weakening. "Nathaniel did. You take his money?" he asked suddenly. "No," she said, surprised by the question. Relief washed over his face. "Good. Because I would have followed you, you know, wherever you went." The simple declaration stole her breath away. In that moment, Soraya admitted to herself what she had been trying to deny for weeks. She was falling in love with Nathaniel. "Greaves, I'm not leaving," she said finally. "Not unless you want me to go." "I don't," he said firmly. "I want you to stay, for as long as you want to be here." That night, Soraya dreamed of her sister for the first time without waking in terror. In the dream, her sister was smiling, pointing toward the horizon where the sun was rising. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Peterson, the general store owner's wife, arrived with a basket over her arm. "Good morning," she said, nervously when Soraya opened the door. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Soraya replied, though she was puzzled by the visit. The Petersons had been cool to her on her infrequent visits to town. "I brought some baking," Mrs. Peterson explained, holding out the basket. "Fresh bread and muffins and some of my raspberry preserves. Thomas, Mr. Peterson, doesn't know I'm here." Soraya accepted the basket with murmured thanks, still confused. "Also wanted to thank you," the older woman continued, twisting her hands in her apron. "For what you did for my Jimmy." "Jimmy," Soraya repeated, trying to place the name. "My grandson," Mrs. Peterson clarified. "The little boy with the cough? You gave him that tea last week when you were in the store. The doctor said it was just a cold that would pass, but he'd been suffering for days. Your tea cleared it right up." Soraya remembered now. A small boy coughing painfully while his mother tried to shop. Soraya had asked permission to help, then mixed a simple remedy from herbs she'd brought to town to sell. "I'm glad it helped," she said. "It more than helped," Mrs. Peterson insisted. "He was better by morning. I wanted you to know that not everyone in town thinks, that is, some of us are grateful you're here." After the woman left, Soraya brought the basket to Nathaniel, who was working on plans for a new irrigation system at the kitchen table. "Here it seems you've made a friend," he observed, helping himself to a still warm muffin. "It was just a simple remedy," Soraya said, downplaying the gesture. "Any of my people would know it." "But you're the one who's here," Nathaniel pointed out. "The one who was willing to help despite how they've treated you." In the weeks that followed, Mrs. Peterson's visit proved to be just the beginning. A young mother came seeking help for her colicky baby. An old man with aching joints asked for one of Soraya's herbal compresses. Slowly, cautiously, people began to approach the ranch house, seeking Soraya's knowledge of natural remedies. Nathaniel encouraged her, building shelves in the kitchen where she could store her dried herbs and tinctures. He even convinced her to start a medicinal garden separate from the vegetable plot. "You have a gift," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch, watching fireflies dance in the growing darkness. "You should share it." "My mother was our village's healer," Soraya admitted. "She taught me from the time I could walk. I never thought I'd use that knowledge here, among—" She trailed off. "Among white people," Nathaniel finished for her. She nodded. "They took everything from me. My family, my home, my freedom. I never imagined I would give them anything in return." "You're not giving to those who took from you," Nathaniel said gently. "You're giving to people who had no part in that cruelty. People who might learn to see you, to see your people, differently because of your kindness." Soraya considered his words. "Perhaps, or perhaps they just want what I can give them without truly seeing me at all." "Some might," Nathaniel acknowledged. "But others will see. Change comes slowly, one heart at a time." As spring turned to early summer, the visits increased. Soraya began keeping regular hours for consultations, charging small amounts for her remedies, at Nathaniel's insistence. "Your knowledge has value," he told her firmly when she protested. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." One sunny afternoon, while Nathaniel was working in town with the blacksmith on a new irrigation gate design, Soraya heard frantic shouting from the road. She looked up from her gardening to see a man running toward the house, waving his arms. "Help! Please, help!" he called. "It's the children!" Soraya dropped her tools and ran to meet him. The man was Joe Turner, who owned a small farm by the river. "What's happened?" she asked, already reaching for her medicine bag. "The river," he gasped, out of breath from running. "The children were playing. The banks gave way. 2 of them are trapped on a sandbar, and the water's rising fast." Without hesitation, Soraya followed him, running the half-mile to the river at full speed. When they arrived, a crowd had gathered on the bank. In the middle of the swollen river, 2 children, a boy and a girl no more than 8 or 9 years old, huddled on a small sandbar that was shrinking by the minute as the water rose around them. "The spring melt came early this year," someone explained. "The river's higher than we've ever seen it. We tried to reach them with a rope, but the current's too strong," another man added. Soraya assessed the situation quickly. The children were terrified, the boy holding the sobbing girl as the water inched closer to their feet. "Who are they?" she asked. "The Miller children," a woman replied. "Sally and Tim." Soraya recognized the name. Their father had been one of the most vocal critics when Nathaniel first brought her to town. "We've sent for help from town," Joe Turner said. "But it'll take too long. The water's rising too fast." Soraya looked at the river, then at the frightened children. She made her decision in an instant. "I need rope," she said firmly. "And something that floats, a barrel lid, anything." The men looked at her dubiously, but Joe Turner nodded. "My wife's wash basin is wood. It might float." While he ran to get it, Soraya removed her boots and outer skirt, leaving only her lighter undergarments. Some of the women gasped, but she ignored them, focused only on the children. When Joe returned with the wooden wash basin and a coil of rope, Soraya quickly tied the rope around her waist and handed the other end to the strongest-looking men. "Pull when I tug 3 times, she instructed. "Not before." Before anyone could protest, she pushed the wash basin into the water, held onto it and slipped into the river. The current immediately tried to sweep her away, but she was a strong swimmer. All Shoshone children learned to swim, almost before they could walk. Using the basin for support, she kicked her way across the churning water, fighting against the pull of the current. The crowd on the shore watched in tense silence as she made slow progress toward the sandbar. The children saw her coming and cried out in relief and fear. The water had reached their knees now, and the little girl was shivering with cold and terror. "Hold on," Soraya called over the roar of the water. "I'm coming!" With a final surge of effort, she reached the sandbar and pulled herself up beside the children. Both were soaked and trembling. "Are you hurt?" she asked, quickly checking them for injuries. The boy shook his head. No. But Sally's scared. The water keeps getting higher." "I know," Soraya said calmly, "but we're going to get you back to shore. Can you be brave for just a little longer?" The children nodded, their eyes wide with trust that broke Soraya's heart. These children didn't see her as a savage or an outsider, just as someone who had come to help them. "Here's what we're going to do," she explained, placing the wooden basin on the remaining dry part of the sandbar. "Sally, you're going to—" "Sit in this. Tim, you'll hold onto the edge. I'll swim and push you both to shore. The rope will help pull us." The little girl looked doubtful. "Will it hold me?" "Yes," Soraya assured her, though she wasn't entirely certain. "You're light as a feather." With shaking limbs, Sally climbed into the makeshift boat. Soraya positioned Tim at the edge where he could hold on, then slipped back into the water. "Hold tight," she instructed, "and don't be afraid." Pushing the basin ahead of her, Soraya began the difficult journey back to shore. The current was even, stronger now, and she had to use all her strength to keep them on course. Twice the basin nearly capsized, but she managed to steady it. Tim was crying silently, his knuckles white where he gripped the edge. When they were halfway across, Soraya tugged the rope 3 times. Immediately she felt the pull as the men on shore began to haul them in. The added support made the final stretch easier, and soon they were close enough for hands to reach out and pull the children to safety. Exhausted, Soraya let the current carry her the last few feet to shore, where Joe Turner and another man helped her out of the water. The crowd erupted in cheers and relieved cries as the Miller children were wrapped in blankets and embraced by their sobbing parents. Mrs. Miller, clutching her daughter tightly, looked over at Soraya with tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving them." Mr. Miller, who had once loudly proclaimed that Indians shouldn't be allowed in decent folks' company, stood speechless, his son in his arms. Finally, he stepped forward and extended his hand to Soraya. "I was wrong about you," he said, his Arki voice rough with emotion. "I owe you a debt I can never repay." Soraya, dripping and exhausted, accepted his handshake with a simple nod. Someone draped a blanket around her shoulders, and as the adrenaline faded, she began to tremble with cold and exertion. Through the crowd, she saw a familiar figure running toward her, Nathaniel, his face pale with worry. "Soraya," he called, pushing through the gathering. When he reached her, he took in her wet clothing and exhausted state in one glance. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "The children," she managed through chattering teeth. "They were trapped. The river." Understanding dawned on his face as others filled in the story, voices overlapping in their eagerness to describe her bravery. She swam out there like she was born in the water. Never seen anything like it. Those kids would be gone if not for her. Nathaniel wrapped his arm around her shoulders, supporting her as her legs threatened to give way. "Let's get you home," he murmured. "You need dry clothes and rest." As he led her away, people reached out to touch her arm or shoulder in gratitude and newfound respect. The same townspeople who had once crossed the street to avoid her now looked at her with admiration in their eyes. Back at the ranch house, Nathaniel built up the fire while Soraya changed into dry clothes. When she emerged from her room, wrapped in a warm shawl, he had hot tea waiting. "You could have died," he said softly as she sat beside the fire. "The children would have died if I hadn't gone," she replied simply. Nathaniel shook his head in wonder. "You never cease to amaze me, Soraya. Your courage, your compassion." "They're just children," she said. "It doesn't matter whose children." "They are. Not everyone would see it that way," he pointed out. "My people believe that all children are sacred," Soraya explained, warming her hands on the teacup. "They belong to the future, not to the past with all its hatreds and mistakes." Nathaniel studied her face in the firelight. "You are extraordinary. Do you know that?" Soraya looked away, uncomfortable with his praise. "I just did what needed to be done." The next day, word of Soraya's heroism spread throughout Red Hollow. People began to stop by the ranch house, not seeking remedies but bringing gifts. Mrs. Peterson brought more baked goods. The blacksmith's wife brought a handmade quilt. Joe Turner and his sons delivered a load of firewood. Even Elizabeth Whitmore's mother came, bringing a basket of fine teas from her personal collection. "My husband would be furious if he knew I was here," she confided to Soraya. "But I wanted to thank you myself for what you did. Those children are my niece's cousins." The most surprising visitor was Sheriff Taylor, who had always been cool and official in his dealings with Soraya. "Miss Soraya," he said, removing his hat as she opened the door, "I wanted to come by and express the town's gratitude for your bravery yesterday." "That's not necessary, Sheriff," she replied. Maybe not, but it's deserved. He shifted uncomfortably. I also wanted to apologize. When Mr. Greaves first brought you here, I had my doubts. Thought it might lead to trouble. And now? Soraya asked. Now I think Red Hollow is lucky to have you, he said honestly. Not everyone will change their minds, mind you. Some folks are set in their ways, but you've earned my respect for what that's worth. That evening, as Soraya and Nathaniel sat on the porch watching the sunset, she reflected on the day's events. It's strange, she said. All it took was one act to change how they see me. People fear what they don't understand, Nathaniel replied. Yesterday you gave them a chance to see beyond their fear to who you really are. Not all of them, Soraya pointed out. Your father hasn't come. Nathaniel sighed. Father is a proud man. It will take more than one heroic act to change his mind. I'm not seeking his approval, Soraya said firmly. I know. Nathaniel reached for her hand, something he did more often now. But it matters to me, not because I need his blessing, but because I want him to see you as I do. And how do you see me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathaniel turned to face her fully, his eyes serious in the fading light. I see a woman of extraordinary courage and compassion, a woman who has faced unimaginable loss, yet still finds the strength to care for others, a woman who makes me want to be better than I am. Soraya felt her heart quicken at his words. Nathaniel, I'm in love with you, Soraya, he said simply. I have been for some time now. I didn't want to tell you because I was afraid it would make you uncomfortable, that you might feel obligated in some way because of our situation. But after yesterday, seeing you risk your life for those children, I can't keep it to myself any longer. Soraya was silent for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. When you bought my contract, she finally said, you told me you wanted to ask someday if a girl like me could love a man like you. Nathaniel nodded, his expression vulnerable. I remember. The answer is yes, Soraya said softly. I didn't think it was possible. I didn't want it to be possible, but it is. Joy spread across Nathaniel's face like sunrise. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned forward and kissed her gently. Soraya closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel the tenderness of the moment without fear or doubt. When they separated, Nathaniel kept her hand in his. Whatever happens, whatever the town or my father or anyone else thinks, know that I love you, Soraya, not as something to possess or protect, but as my equal, as the woman who has changed my life in ways I never imagined possible. I love you. Too, she replied, the word still new and strange on her tongue, and I'm not afraid anymore. As darkness fell, they remained on the porch, talking softly of the future, a future neither had dared to imagine before. For the first time, Soraya allowed herself to believe that happiness might be possible, even for someone who had lost as much as she had. The sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted their conversation. Nathaniel stood, peering into the darkness. Who would come at this hour? He wondered aloud. A moment later, a rider emerged from the shadows. Even in the dim light, Soraya recognized Edward Greaves. Nathaniel stiffened beside her. Father, what brings you here so late? Edward dismounted, his movements stiff and formal. He looked older than when Soraya had last seen him, the lines in his face deeper. I heard what happened at the river, he said without preamble. The whole town is talking of nothing else. Soraya saved 2 children from drowning, Nathaniel said, a protective edge to his voice, at great risk to herself. Edward nodded slowly. So I was told. The Miller children. Does that surprise you? Nathaniel challenged. That she would risk her life for the children of a man who has spoken against her since the day we arrived. It gives me pause, Edward admitted. He turned to Soraya. The Millers have been friends of our family for 3 generations. Tim and Sally are my godchildren. Soraya hadn't known this connection, but she simply nodded, waiting for him to continue. Mrs. Miller came to see me today, Edward went on. She was quite emphatic in her opinions regarding my treatment of you both. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Martha Miller has never been one to mince words. She's not the only one who's changed their mind about Soraya, Nathaniel pointed out. Half the town has been here today, bringing gifts and thanks. Yes, well, Edward cleared his throat uncomfortably. It seems I may have been hasty in my judgments. Coming from Edward Greaves, this was as close to an apology as one was likely to get. Nathaniel's eyebrows rose in surprise. I've also been thinking about your mother, Edward continued, addressing his son now. About what she would say if she could see how I've behaved. She would be deeply disappointed in me, I think. She valued kindness above all else, Nathaniel agreed quietly. Edward nodded, his eyes distant with memory. She did, and I have not been kind. He straightened his shoulders, visibly gathering himself. I've come to invite you both to dinner. At the house, tomorrow evening if you're available. The invitation hung in the air, unexpected and weighted with significance. Nathaniel looked at Soraya, leaving the decision to her. We would be honored, she said after a moment's consideration. Relief flickered across Edward's face. Good, that's good. He turned to go, then paused. And Nathaniel? Yes, Father? Your work with the farmers, the irrigation systems. I've heard good reports. Very innovative solutions, they say. Nathaniel blinked in surprise at this acknowledgement. Thank you. Edward nodded once more, then mounted his horse. Until tomorrow, then. As they watched him ride away, Soraya squeezed Nathaniel's hand. Your father is a proud man, but perhaps not an unchangeable one. Wonders never cease, Nathaniel murmured. First the town, now my father. What's next? Elizabeth Whitmore asking. You for gardening advice? Soraya laughed, the sound light and free in the night air. I wouldn't go that far. Inside the house, as they prepared for bed, Nathaniel paused at the foot of the stairs. Whatever happens tomorrow with my father, know that you've already accomplished something remarkable, he told her. You've shown this town that a person should be judged by their actions and their heart, not by where they come from or what they look like. We've done it together, Soraya corrected him. I wouldn't be here without you. And I wouldn't be the man I am without you, he replied. That night, Soraya dreamed not of her sister's screams, but of children laughing by a calm river, of gardens in full bloom, and of a future filled with possibility, a future with Nathaniel by her side. The Greaves mansion stood at U, the north end of Red Hollow's main street, its white columns and manicured grounds, a testament to Edward Greaves's wealth and position. Soraya had seen it from a distance, but had never imagined she would step inside. Are you nervous? Nathaniel asked as they approached the house in his wagon. He had worn his best suit for the occasion, and Soraya wore a simple but elegant blue dress that Mrs. Peterson had helped her alter. Yes, she admitted, your father invited us out of obligation, not desire. I doubt his opinion of me has truly changed. Nathaniel took her hand. Remember, we can leave any time you wish. Just say the word. The front door opened before they reached it, revealing a stiff-backed butler who eyed Soraya with barely concealed surprise. Mr. Nathaniel, he greeted formally. And Miss Soraya, Mr. Greaves is waiting in the drawing room. As they followed him through the grand entrance hall, Soraya took in the polished wood, crystal chandeliers, and expensive furnishings. This was a house designed to impress, to remind visitors of the owner's importance. Edward Greaves stood by the fireplace, a glass of brandy in his hand. He looked uncomfortable but determined. Nathaniel, Miss Soraya, thank you for coming. He gestured to the elegant furniture. Please sit down, dinner will be served shortly. The conversation was stilted at first, with Edward asking careful questions about Nathaniel's irrigation work and Soraya's garden. Soraya answered politely but briefly, aware of the butler's curious eyes each time he entered the room. When they moved to the dining room, Soraya was momentarily overwhelmed by the array of silverware at her place setting. Nathaniel, noticing her hesitation, gave her an encouraging smile. Just work from the outside in, he whispered. That's what Mother taught me. The meal progressed with the same careful conversation until, over dessert, Edward finally addressed the elephant in the room. I owe you both an apology, he said, setting down his fork. My behavior these past months has been inexcusable. Nathaniel looked up in surprise. His father had never been one to admit fault. I was angry, Edward continued. Angry that you defied me, Nathaniel. Angry that you chose a different path than the one I laid out for you. But I've had time to reflect, especially after what happened at the river. He turned to Soraya. Miss Sarisha, I judged you unfairly. Based on prejudices I've carried my entire life. When Martha Miller told me how you risked your life for her children without hesitation, I began to question those prejudices. The children needed help, Soraya said simply. Anyone would have done the same. But no one else did, Edward pointed out. They stood on the bank wringing their hands while you acted. That says something about your character that I cannot ignore. Nathaniel watched his father with cautious hope. Does this mean you're willing to accept our relationship? Edward's expression tightened slightly. I'm trying to understand it. When your mother was alive, she often spoke of looking beyond appearances to the heart of a person. It seems you inherited that quality from her? I wish she could have met Soraya, Nathaniel said softly. They would have liked each other. A shadow of grief passed over Edward's face. Yes, I believe they would have. He cleared his throat. In any case, I want you to know that my door is open to you both. And Nathaniel, if you ever wish to return to the bank, there will be a place for you. Thank you, Father, Nathaniel replied, but I've found my calling in the work I'm doing with the farmers. It's making a real difference in their lives. Edward nodded, accepting if not entirely understanding. Very well, but the offer stands. He hesitated, then added, and your monthly allowance will be reinstated. I should never have cut you off. After dinner, Edward invited them into the study, a room Nathaniel had rarely been allowed to enter as a child. It had been his father's private sanctuary, where business deals were made and fortunes decided. There's something I want to show you, Edward said, going to his desk and removing a small key from his pocket. He unlocked a drawer and pulled out a velvet box. This belonged to your mother. He handed the box to Nathaniel, who opened it carefully. Inside lay a delicate gold locket with a small diamond at its center. It was her grandmother's, Edward explained. She always said it should go to the woman you would someday marry. Nathaniel looked up sharply. Father, are you saying... I'm saying that your mother would want her to have it, Edward replied, gesturing towards Soraya. Whether or not marriage is in your future is for you to decide. The simple acknowledgement of their relationship as something potentially permanent, something his father could envision leading to marriage, left Nathaniel speechless. On the ride, home, Soraya held the velvet box in her lap, still stunned by Edward's gesture. I can't accept this, she said finally. It's a family heirloom, which is exactly why you should have it, Nathaniel argued gently. Father wouldn't have given it to you if he didn't mean it. It's his way of saying you belong with us, with me. Soraya opened the box and touched the locket gently. It's beautiful. Like you, Nathaniel said, taking her hand. Will you wear it? After a moment's hesitation, Soraya nodded. Nathaniel stopped the wagon and helped her fasten the locket around her neck. The gold gleamed warmly against her skin in the moonlight. Perfect, he murmured, kissing her softly. The dinner at the Greaves mansion marked a turning point. Though Edward didn't immediately become Soraya's champion, he began to acknowledge her in public, nodding politely when they passed on the street, or exchanging brief pleasantries when business brought him to the parts of town where she might be for Red Hollow. Seeing Edward Greaves treat Soraya with respect removed the last major barrier to her acceptance. If the town's most prominent citizen could overcome his prejudice, others had little excuse to cling to theirs. Summer settled over Red Hollow, bringing long, hot days and the sweet fragrance of Soraya's flourishing garden. Her small business, providing herbal remedies, had grown steadily, with people coming from neighboring towns to seek her help. Nathaniel had converted the old tool shed into a proper workroom where she could prepare her medicines and see patients. One particularly hot afternoon, Soraya was working in her garden when she heard the sound of children's voices. Looking up, she saw a small group approaching the house, Sally and Tim Miller, accompanied by 3 other children she recognized from town. Miss Soraya, Sally called, waving enthusiastically. Can we visit? Mama said it was all right if we didn't stay. Too long. Since the river rescue, the Miller children had become regular visitors, fascinated by Soraya's stories of Shoshone life and her knowledge of plants and animals. Of course, Soraya replied, smiling as the children rushed into the garden. I was just about to take a break. We brought our friends, Tim explained. They wanted to hear the coyote story you told us. Soraya settled on the porch steps, surrounded by eager young faces. The children of Red Hollow, unlike their parents, had accepted her without reservation, drawn by her gentle manner and fascinating tales. "Very well," she agreed. "The story of how Coyote brought fire to the people. But first, would you like some lemonade? It's very hot today." While the children sipped lemonade, Soraya began the story, using the animated gestures and voice changes that always captivated her young audience. She was so engrossed in the telling that she didn't notice Mrs. Whitmore and Elizabeth approaching until they were at the garden gate. The children fell silent, turning to look at the newcomers. Elizabeth Whitmore's face bore its usual expression of disdain, but her mother stepped forward with determined politeness. "Good afternoon, Miss Soraya," Mrs. Whitmore said. "I hope we're not interrupting." "Not at all," Soraya replied, rising to her feet. "The children and I were just sharing stories." Mrs. Whitmore nodded stiffly. "Yes, well, we've come on a matter of some importance. The town council is organizing the annual Founders' Day celebration, and we're seeking contributions for the event." Elizabeth remained at the gate, clearly uncomfortable with the visit, while her mother continued. "We're asking each household to contribute something. Food, decorations, or assistance with the preparations," Mrs. Whitmore explained. "Given your knowledge of medicinal plants, we thought perhaps you might prepare something for the first aid tent. There are always scrapes and heat exhaustion during the festivities." Soraya was taken aback by the request. The Founders' Day celebration was Red Hollow's most important annual event, a commemoration of the town's establishment. For her to be invited to participate was significant. "I would be honored," she said honestly. "I can prepare compresses for headaches and salves for minor injuries." "Excellent," Mrs. Whitmore replied, seemingly relieved that the request had been accepted. "The celebration is in 2 weeks. I'll send someone with the details." As they turned to leave, Elizabeth finally spoke. "The children shouldn't be here without their parents," she said sharply. "It's not appropriate." Before Soraya could respond, young Sally Miller stood up. "My mama knows we're here," she said with childish defiance. "She says Miss Soraya is a hero and we can visit whenever we want." Elizabeth's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Children should be seen and not heard, Sally Miller. And some adults should learn when to hold their tongue," came a new voice. Nathaniel had returned from town and now stood beside the wagon watching the scene with a frown. Elizabeth stiffened at the sight of him. Despite the broken engagement, she had never fully accepted that Nathaniel had chosen Soraya over her. "Nathaniel," she said coolly. "Still playing at being a farmer, I see." "Not playing, Elizabeth. Working. There's a difference, though I wouldn't expect you to understand it." He walked to stand beside Soraya, his hand finding hers naturally. Mrs. Whitmore, sensing the tension, took her daughter's arm. "We should be going. Thank you for your contribution, Miss Soraya. Good day to you both." As they walked away, Elizabeth could be heard complaining, "I don't see why we had to invite her. It's not as if saving those children changes what she is." "And what am I?" Soraya murmured, more to herself than to Nathaniel. "You're the woman who's changing this town for the better," he replied, squeezing her hand. "One stubborn mind at a time." The children, momentarily silenced by the exchange, now tugged at Soraya's skirt. "Can you finish the story, Miss Soraya? What happened when Coyote stole the fire?" Pushing aside thoughts of Elizabeth's hostility, Soraya sat back down and continued the tale, aware of Nathaniel watching her with a tender expression as she brought the ancient story to life for her young audience. Later that evening, after the children had gone home, Soraya and Nathaniel sat on the porch discussing the invitation to participate in Founders' Day. "It's a significant gesture," Nathaniel explained. "The Whitmores have chaired the Founders' Day committee for generations. For them to come here personally means the town council has officially accepted you." "Elizabeth hasn't," Soraya pointed out. Nathaniel sighed. "Elizabeth is complicated. She was raised to believe that her family's status entitles her to certain things. My father encouraged the match because the Whitmores own half the valley. When I broke the engagement, I didn't just reject her, I rejected everything she'd been taught to value." "Do you ever regret it?" Soraya asked, voicing a fear she rarely acknowledged. Do you ever wish you'd chosen the easier path? Nathaniel turned to face her fully. Never, he said firmly. Not for a single moment. The path I've chosen is not easy, but it's right, and it led me to you. The day of the Founders' Day celebration dawned bright and clear. The town square had been transformed with bunting and banners, booths selling food and crafts, and a bandstand where local musicians would perform. Children ran excitedly between attractions while their parents socialized. Soraya had spent days preparing remedies for the first aid tent, cooling compresses, salves for insect bites and scrapes, teas for headaches and upset stomachs. Nathaniel helped her transport everything to town in the wagon. Remember, he told her as they approached the square, you're here as an invited participant, not an outsider. You have every right to be here. Soraya nodded, touching the locket at her throat for reassurance. She had worn it every day since. Edward had given it to her, finding comfort in its connection to Nathaniel's mother. Their arrival drew curious glances, but also friendly waves from those who had come to respect Soraya's skills as a healer. Mrs. Peterson hurried over to help them unload the supplies, chattering about the beautiful weather and the large turnout. In the first aid tent, Soraya arranged her remedies neatly on a table, labeling each clearly. The town doctor, Dr. Wilson, stopped by to inspect her work with professional curiosity. Interesting. Preparations, he commented, examining a jar of salve. What's in this one? Comfrey, calendula, and plantain, Soraya explained. For cuts and scrapes. Dr. Wilson nodded thoughtfully. Effective choices. I've read about indigenous healing practices, but never had the opportunity to observe them firsthand. Perhaps we could discuss your methods sometime. There might be valuable knowledge we could incorporate into modern medicine. I would like that, Soraya replied, surprised and pleased by his respectful interest. The morning passed pleasantly as townspeople stopped by the tent to say hello or inquire about remedies for various ailments. Around midday, Nathaniel brought Sarita a plate of food from one of the booths. You should take a break, he urged. Come see the rest of the celebration. Reluctantly, Soraya left her post in the care of Mrs. Peterson's daughter and accompanied Nathaniel through the square. Though some people still stared, many others greeted her warmly, especially those she had helped with her remedies. They were watching a horseshoe competition when Edward Greaves approached, looking unusually informal without his usual business suit. Nathaniel, Miss Soraya, he greeted them. Enjoying the festivities? Very much, Nathaniel replied. It's good to see you here, Father. You usually avoid these gatherings. Edward shrugged. Your mother always loved Founders' Day. She said it was when Red Hollow felt most like a true community. I thought it was time I honored that memory. His gaze fell on the locket around Soraya's neck, and a brief smile crossed his face. It suits you, he said simply. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the bandstand. A man's angry voice rose above the crowd, followed by a woman's pleading. Nathaniel and Soraya exchanged concerned glances and moved toward the disturbance, Edward following. A crowd had gathered around Frank Carter, one of the wealthiest ranchers in the area, and a man known for his volatile temper. He was berating a young woman who worked as a maid in his household, his face flushed with anger and alcohol. Thieving little tramp, he shouted, grabbing the girl's arm roughly. You think I wouldn't notice? Please, Mr. Carter, the girl sobbed. I didn't take anything, I swear. Sheriff Taylor pushed through the crowd, his expression grim. That's enough, Frank. Let the girl go and calm yourself down. She stole my wife's silver bracelet. Carter insisted, his grip tightening until the girl cried out in pain. Found it in her things this morning. I didn't, the girl protested. Someone must have put it there. The situation was escalating dangerously. Carter was a large man, and the alcohol had made him unpredictable. The sheriff looked reluctant to physically intervene against such a prominent citizen. To everyone's surprise, it was Edward Greaves who stepped forward. Frank, he said in the authoritative tone he used in business dealings, you're making a spectacle of yourself and ruining the celebration for everyone. Let the girl go, and we'll sort this out properly. Carter's bloodshot eyes focused on Edward. Stay out of this, Greaves. This is between me and my servant. Actually, it's a matter for the law now, Sheriff Taylor interjected, finding his courage. Let her go, Frank. Instead of complying, Carter shoved the girl roughly. She stumbled and fell, hitting her head on the edge of the bandstand with a sickening crack. Blood immediately began to flow from a gash on her forehead. Soraya pushed forward, without hesitation, kneeling beside the injured girl. "Bring my kit from the first aid tent," she instructed a nearby boy, who ran to do her bidding. Carter loomed over them, still raging. "Don't you touch her, Indian. This is your fault somehow, I know it." "Step back, Frank," Nathaniel warned, moving to stand between Carter and Soraya. "She's trying to help." "Help? She's probably put some heathen curse on the girl." Carter's hand moved to the gun at his hip, a movement that sent a ripple of alarm through the crowd. Edward Greaves stepped beside his son, his voice cold with anger. "Remove your hand from that weapon, Frank Carter, or so help me, I'll see you ruined in this town." The boy returned with Soraya's medical kit, and she focused on the injured girl, cleaning the wound and applying pressure to stop the bleeding. The girl was dazed but conscious. "What's your name?" Soraya asked gently. "Mary," the girl whispered. "Mary Collins." "You're going to be all right, Mary," Soraya assured her, applying a healing salve to the wound before bandaging it. "Head wounds. Bleed a lot, but this isn't too deep." By now, Sheriff Taylor had convinced Carter to move away, though the man continued to mutter threats and accusations. The crowd began to disperse, the festive mood temporarily dampened by the ugly scene. Dr. Wilson appeared and knelt beside Soraya to examine her work. "Clean bandaging," he commented approvingly. "The salve? It will prevent infection and help with the pain," Soraya explained. The doctor nodded. "Good. We should move her somewhere quiet to rest. She may have a concussion." Together, they helped Mary to a quiet corner of the first aid tent, where Soraya prepared a mild tea to help with the girl's headache and shock. "Thank you," Mary whispered, her eyes wide with gratitude and lingering fear. "No one ever stands up to Mr. Carter. He's too important. No one is too important to treat others with basic decency," Soraya replied, smoothing the girl's hair back from her bandaged forehead. Outside the tent, Nathaniel and his father were engaged in intense conversation with Sheriff Taylor. "Carter's gone too far this time," Edward was saying. "Accusing that girl without proof, assaulting her in public, and then drawing his weapon? It's unacceptable." The sheriff looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Carter has a lot of friends on the town council, Mr. Greaves, and he was drunk. By tomorrow, half the town will have excused his behavior." "Not if we don't let them," Nathaniel argued. "That girl deserves justice. What she needs is a new position," Edward said thoughtfully. "Away from Carter." He turned to the sheriff. "I'll speak with Mrs. Wilson about taking Mary on as a housemaid. She's been looking for help since her last girl got married." Sheriff Taylor nodded, relieved at this practical solution. That might be best for everyone. When Soraya emerged from the tent, Edward approached her. "How is the girl?" "Shaken and frightened, but the wound isn't serious," Soraya replied. "She'll need rest and someone to watch over her tonight." "I've arranged for her to stay with the Wilsons," Edward informed her, "and potentially to work for them if she wishes." Soraya studied the banker's face with new respect. "That was kind of you, Mr. Greaves." "Perhaps I'm learning something from my son," Edward replied, glancing at Nathaniel. "And from you." The incident with Carter cast a shadow over the remainder of the celebration, but it also revealed how much had changed in Red Hollow. Many people who witnessed the scene sought out Soraya afterward to praise her quick response and gentle care. Of Mary Collins. By evening, when the dancing began in the square, the mood had largely recovered. Soraya watched from the sidelines as couples twirled to the lively music, Nathaniel at her side. "Would you like to dance?" he asked, noticing her tapping foot. Soraya hesitated. "I don't know the steps." "Neither do I, really," Nathaniel admitted, with a grin. "Mother tried to teach me, but I have 2 left feet. We can be terrible together." With a laugh, Soraya allowed him to lead her onto the makeshift dance floor. There were a few surprised looks, but no one objected as Nathaniel placed his hand respectfully at her waist and began to guide her through a simple waltz. "See? Not so difficult," he murmured as they moved among the other dancers. Soraya relaxed, into the movement following his lead. "This is nice," she admitted. "My people have different dances, more connected to the earth." "You'll have to teach me sometime," Nathaniel said. I'd like that. As the music slowed, Nathaniel drew her closer. You were amazing today, he said softly. With Mary, with everyone. You belong here, Soraya. I hope you know that now. Looking around at the familiar faces, some friendly, some still cautious but none openly hostile, Soraya felt something settle inside her. Not complete acceptance, perhaps, but a beginning. I'm starting to believe it, she replied. Later that night, as they drove home under a canopy of stars, Soraya reflected on the day. So much has changed since you found me on that auction block, she said. I never imagined I could have this kind of life again, with purpose, with community. With love, Nathaniel added, taking her hand. With love, she agreed, the greatest change of all. When they reached the ranch house, Nathaniel helped her down from the wagon, and then, instead of heading inside, led her to the garden she had created. I have something to ask you, he said, his voice suddenly serious. Something I've been thinking about for a while now. Soraya's heart quickened. What is it? In the silver light of the moon, Nathaniel took both her hands in his. When I bought your contract that day, I told you I wanted to ask if a girl like you could love a man like me. You've answered that question more beautifully than I could have hoped. He took a deep breath. Now I have another question. Will you marry me, Soraya? Not because society expects it or because it would be proper, but because I love you and want to build a life with you, as equals, as partners. Soraya felt tears sting her eyes. Nathaniel. I know it won't be easy, he continued quickly. There will always be people who don't understand or approve, but I don't care about them. I care about you, about us. Yes, Soraya said simply. Yes, I will marry you. Joy lit Nathaniel's face as he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the love and promise of their future together. When they finally separated, breathless and laughing, Nathaniel pressed his forehead to hers. There's something else, he said, something I've been working on. What more could there be, Soraya asked, still dazed with happiness. Come with me tomorrow, he replied mysteriously. There's something I want to show you. The next morning, Nathaniel drove them several miles out of town, following a winding road into the foothills. When they crested a rise, he stopped the wagon and helped Soraya down. Before them stretched a beautiful valley, with a clear stream running through it and mountains rising in the distance. Wildflowers dotted the meadow and a grove of cottonwood. Trees provided shade near the water. What is this place? Soraya asked, enchanted by the peaceful beauty. It's ours, Nathaniel said, watching her face. Or it can be if you want it. I've been saving from my irrigation work, and with some of my mother's inheritance I was able to buy this land last month. Soraya turned to him in shock. You bought this? He nodded. I thought we could build a home here, somewhere that's truly ours, not tied to my family's history or the town's judgment, somewhere we can start fresh. It's beautiful, Soraya breathed, taking in the sweeping vista. It reminds me of the valley where my village was before. I know, Nathaniel said, softly. That's partly why I chose it. I thought perhaps it could help heal some of those memories, to create new ones in a place that feels like home to you. Tears filled Soraya's eyes as the full meaning of his gesture sank in. This wasn't just land or a future home. It was a gift of understanding, of acknowledging her past while offering a new beginning. There's more, Nathaniel continued, reaching into his pocket and pulling out an envelope. This is for you. Soraya opened it and found a legal document inside. Her eyes widened as she read the words. It's a deed, Nathaniel explained, to half of this land in your name, not as my wife but as yourself, Soraya of the Shoshone people, your own land that no one can ever take from you. Soraya stared at the paper in her hands, unable to speak. In a world where women rarely owned property, where native people had been systematically stripped of their lands, this piece of paper represented something profound: security, respect, equality. You never had to buy me, she finally whispered, echoing his words from long ago. You just had to see me. And I do see you, Soraya, Nathaniel replied earnestly. All of you, your strength, your compassion, your resilience. I see everything you are and everything we can be together. Standing in the meadow that would become their home, Surrounded by the beauty of the land that now partly belonged to her, Soraya felt a circle closing. From captivity to freedom, from isolation to love, from loss to new beginnings, her journey had brought her here, to this moment, to this man. "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate for the emotions swelling in her heart. Nathaniel smiled, understanding all she couldn't express. "No, Soraya, thank you for teaching me what true courage looks like, for showing me how to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult, for loving me despite everything that should have kept us apart." As they walked through their land, planning where they might build a house, where Soraya could plant a new garden, where children might someday play, the future stretched before them, not easy perhaps, but full of promise. On the ride back to town, Soraya held the deed carefully in her lap, still marveling at what it represented. "When should we tell people? About the engagement, about the land?" "Whenever you're ready," Nathaniel replied. "Though I suspect my father already knows about the engagement. He's been giving me knowing looks ever since he gave you Mother's locket." Soraya laughed. "He's more perceptive than you give him credit for." "He's changing," Nathaniel acknowledged. "We all are." As they approached Red Hollow, they noticed unusual activity in the town square. A crowd had gathered, and the sheriff's deputies were visible among the throng. "What's happening?" Soraya wondered as Nathaniel guided the wagon closer. They soon got their answer. Frank Carter was being led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of fury, as Sheriff Taylor escorted him toward the jail. "What's going on?" Nathaniel asked a bystander. "Carter's been arrested," the man explained eagerly. "That girl he accused of stealing. Turns out his wife found the bracelet under their bed this morning. It had fallen there all along, and when she told him, he flew into a rage and hit her too." "Is Mrs. Carter all right?" Soraya asked with concern. Shaken. "But yes, she's the one who sent for the sheriff. Said she'd had enough of his temper and his drinking." As they watched Carter being led away, Edward Greaves approached their wagon. "I see you've heard the news," he observed. "Justice catches up with everyone eventually." "Even in Red Hollow," Nathaniel agreed. "Father, we have something to tell you." Edward's eyebrows rose expectantly. "Oh?" "Soraya has agreed to marry me," Nathaniel announced, unable to keep the joy from his voice. Instead of the resistance or hesitation they half expected, Edward's face softened. "I suspected as much," he said. "When will the wedding be?" "We haven't decided yet," Soraya replied, still surprised by his easy acceptance. Edward nodded thoughtfully. "Well, when you do, I hope you'll allow me to host it. If not at the house, then perhaps in the gardens. Your mother would have wanted that, Nathaniel." The simple offer, with its acknowledgement of their relationship and its connection to Nathaniel's beloved mother, moved them both deeply. "We would be honored," Nathaniel said, his voice thick with emotion. As they continued toward home, Soraya reflected on how far they had come, how far she had come, since that terrible day on the auction block. The journey had been painful and difficult, marked by prejudice and misunderstanding, but it had also been illuminated by moments of unexpected kindness, of growing acceptance, and of a love that had defied all odds. With the deed to her land secure in her pocket and Nathaniel's ring soon to grace her finger, Soraya faced the future with something she had thought lost forever: hope. That evening, as they sat on the porch of the ranch house that had become their temporary home, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Nathaniel asked, "Are you happy, Soraya? Truly happy?" She considered the question carefully, thinking of all she had lost and all she had found. "I am," she said finally. "Not in the same way I was before the raid. That happiness is gone forever, but I've found a new kind, different but just as real." "And someday," Nathaniel prompted gently. "Our own home, perhaps children." Soraya smiled at the thought. "Children who will know both worlds, yours and mine, who will learn the stories of both their peoples. Yes, I would like that very much." Nathaniel kissed her hand, his eyes full of love and promise. "Then that's what we'll build together, a bridge between worlds, starting with us." As night fell over Red Hollow, stars appearing one by one in the darkening sky, Soraya and Nathaniel remained on the porch, planning their future and healing their past. One shared dream at a time, news of Nathaniel and Soraya's engagement spread quickly through Red Hollow. Most people offered congratulations, though some still whispered behind their hands about the unusual match. Elizabeth Whitmore made a point of leaving any shop Soraya entered, her nose in the air, but such open hostility had become the exception rather than the rule. "Have you thought about when you'd like to have the wedding?" Edward asked one evening when they joined him for dinner at the mansion. In the weeks since their engagement, these family dinners had become a regular occurrence, still sometimes awkward but increasingly warm. "Before winter," Nathaniel replied, looking to Soraya for confirmation. "We'd like to start building on our land as soon as possible." Edward nodded thoughtfully. "Wise to get the foundation in before the ground freezes. And the wedding itself? Will it be a traditional ceremony?" Soraya and Nathaniel exchanged glances. They had discussed this at length, trying to find a way to honor both their heritages. "We thought perhaps a combination," Soraya explained. "Parts of a traditional white wedding, but also elements from my people's customs." Edward looked uncertain, but made an effort to appear supportive. "I see, and what would that entail?" "Nothing too alarming, Father," Nathaniel said with a slight smile. "Soraya's people have beautiful rituals involving nature, family bonds, and promises for the future. The blanket ceremony is most important," Soraya added, where the couple is wrapped together in a blanket to symbolize their union. Edward considered. This then nodded. "Your mother would have appreciated such symbolism," he told Nathaniel. "She always said the church didn't have a monopoly on meaningful rituals. This simple acceptance meant more to Soraya than Edward could know. She had feared that planning a wedding that honored her heritage would face resistance, even from those who had come to accept her presence in town. "Thank you," she said quietly. "It means a great deal to have your blessing." Edward looked slightly embarrassed by her gratitude. "Yes, well, you make my son happy. That's what matters most." As they left the mansion that night, Soraya felt a growing sense of belonging she had never expected to find in Red Hollow. Not complete acceptance, not from everyone, but enough to build a life upon. The next few weeks were filled with preparations. Edward insisted on ordering Soraya's wedding dress from Denver, despite her protests that something simpler would suffice. Mrs. Peterson and several other women from town helped with planning the celebration, eager to be part of what had become the most talked-about wedding in Red Hollow's history. For the ceremonial blanket, Soraya worked in secret, weaving patterns that told the story of her people and incorporating new designs that represented her life with Nathaniel. The work was slow and painstaking, but each thread brought her closer to bridging the two worlds she now inhabited. On a warm afternoon in early September, Soraya was working in her garden when a wagon she didn't recognize approached the ranch house. A woman sat on the driver's bench, her face hidden by a bonnet. As the wagon drew closer, Soraya straightened, brushing dirt from her hands. The woman stopped the wagon and climbed down with fluid grace. When she removed her bonnet, Soraya gasped. The woman's features, though weathered by time and hardship, were unmistakably Shoshone. "Hello, sister," the woman said in the language of their people, a language Soraya hadn't heard spoken in 2 years. "Who are you?" Soraya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Morning Star," the woman replied. "I've come a long way to find you." Soraya invited Morning Star into the house, her mind racing with questions. As they sat at the kitchen table with cups of tea, the older woman studied Soraya's face intently. "You don't remember me," she observed. "You were very young when I left our village to marry a trader." "You married outside our people?" Soraya asked. Morning Star nodded. "My husband was a white man, like yours will be. Jacob was kind and respected our ways. We lived between worlds, much as you do now." "How did you find me?" Soraya wondered. "Word travels," Morning Star explained, "even among the scattered remnants of our people. I heard stories of a Shoshone woman living near Red Hollow, healing with the old ways, engaged to a banker's son. I knew I had to come." Tears filled Soraya's eyes. "I thought I was alone, that everyone from my people was gone or lost to me forever." Morning Star reached across the table and took Soraya's hand. You are not alone, sister. There are others who survived. Some live on reservations to the north. Others have found places, like you have, on the edges of the white man's world. My sister? Saria asked, barely daring to hope. Singing Bird? Have you heard anything of her? Morningstar's eyes filled with sadness. I'm sorry. I have no news of her. The hope that had flared briefly in Saraya's heart dimmed, but didn't extinguish completely. If Morningstar had found her, perhaps someday news of Singing Bird might reach her too. Tell me about the man you're to marry, Morningstar requested, changing the subject gently. Is he good to you? Yes, Saraya replied without hesitation. Nathaniel is different. He sees me as I am, not as what he wants me to be. That is rare, Morningstar observed, among any people. When Nathaniel returned home that evening, he was stunned to find Saraya deep in conversation with another Shoshone woman. They were speaking in their native language, their hands moving expressively as they shared stories. Nathaniel, Saraya said, switching to English as he entered. This is Morningstar. She came looking for me after hearing stories of a Shoshone woman in Red Hollow. Nathaniel greeted their visitor respectfully. You're welcome in our home, Morningstar. Any friend of Saraya's is a friend of mine. Morningstar studied him with keen eyes. You are the banker's son who bought her contract. I am, Nathaniel acknowledged. Though I prefer to think I helped restore her freedom, not purchased it. A slight smile crossed the older woman's face. A good answer. She turned to Saraya. I see why you chose him. Over dinner, Morningstar shared news of other Shoshone survivors and of changes happening among the native peoples of the region. Some were being forced onto reservations, while others struggled to maintain their traditional ways in a rapidly changing world. Our old life is going, she said frankly. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Those who cannot bend will break, but those who can find a way to carry our traditions into this new world, they are the future of our people. She looked meaningfully at Saraya. Your children will be such bridges. They will carry the blood and wisdom of two peoples. The thought of children, of a family with Nathaniel, still seemed like a distant dream to Saraya. But Morningstar spoke of it as a certainty, a continuation of their people's story rather than an ending. Will you stay for the wedding? Saraya asked as the evening grew late. It would mean so much to have someone from my people there. Morningstar considered the request. When will it be? In 3 weeks, Nathaniel replied. You're more than welcome to stay here until then. I have business further west, Morningstar said, but I will return for your ceremony. I wouldn't miss seeing one of our own begin this new chapter. When Morningstar departed the next morning, she left Saraya with a small leather pouch. For your wedding day, she explained, sacred herbs from our people. Burn them as you say your vows, and our ancestors will bless your union. Saraya clutched the pouch to her heart, overwhelmed by this unexpected connection to her past. Thank you, sister. Remember, Morningstar said as she climbed into her wagon, you carry our people with you always. In your blood, in your knowledge, in your spirit. Share these gifts with your new family, and our ways will not be lost. The visit from Morningstar gave Saraya renewed confidence as the wedding approached. She was not just a survivor, not just an outsider finding her place in a new community. She was a bridge between worlds, a keeper of traditions that deserved to live on. With this fresh perspective, she approached the final wedding preparations with enthusiasm, incorporating more elements from her heritage without fear of rejection. To her surprise, many in town expressed genuine interest in these customs, asking questions about their meaning and significance. 2 weeks before the wedding, Edward invited them to the mansion for what he called an important discussion. When they arrived, they found him in the study, several documents spread across his desk. I've been thinking about your future, he began without preamble, specifically about your plans to build on that land you purchased. Nathaniel tensed, slightly anticipating an argument. We've already hired workers to start on the foundation next week, Edward nodded. Yes, I know, and I've taken the liberty of arranging for additional laborers, as well as quality materials at wholesale prices through the bank's connections. Saraya and Nathaniel exchanged startled glances. That's very generous, Father, Nathaniel said, cautiously. It's practical, Edward countered. Winter comes early in these mountains. The more hands working, the sooner you'll have a roof over your heads. He pushed a document toward them. I've also had my attorney draw up this. It's a wedding, gift of sorts. Nathaniel picked up the paper and read it, his eyebrows rising in surprise. Father, this is an additional parcel of land adjoining what you already own, Edward confirmed. It includes water rights to the stream and access to the timber on the north slope, useful for a growing family. Soraya was stunned by the gesture. Mr. Greaves, we can't accept something so valuable. Edward's expression softened slightly. You can and you will. It's not charity, it's family. That's what we are now, isn't it? The simple statement, delivered in Edward's matter-of-fact manner, brought tears to Soraya's eyes. From their first hostile encounter to this moment of acceptance, the journey had been long and difficult, but the destination was worth every painful step. Yes, she agreed softly. We are family. The day before the wedding dawned clear and crisp, with just a hint of autumn in the air. The Greaves' garden had been transformed with flowers, ribbons, and lanterns for the ceremony. A white canopy stood ready for the traditional Christian vows, while nearby, a circle of stones marked the space for the Shoshone blessing ritual. Morning Star had returned as promised, bringing with her 2 other Shoshone women who had married into frontier families. Their presence gave Soraya a sense of continuity, a reminder that she was not the first of her people to forge a new path between worlds. The final preparations were underway when Sheriff Taylor arrived at the ranch house, his expression grave. Miss Soraya, he said, removing his hat. I'm sorry to disturb you before your big day, but I thought you should know. Frank Carter escaped from jail last night. Nathaniel, who had been helping to load Soraya's belongings for the move to their new home after the wedding, joined them with concern. Escaped how? Overpowered a deputy during the night shift, the sheriff explained. Stole a horse and headed west. We've got men searching, but you're worried he might come here, Soraya finished for him. The sheriff nodded reluctantly. Carter made some threats before he escaped, specific threats against you two, said you'd ruined his reputation, cost him his wife and ranch. That's absurd, Nathaniel protested. His own actions did that. Men like Carter don't see it that way, Sheriff Taylor replied grimly. They need someone to blame. I'm posting deputies around the property tonight and at the wedding tomorrow just to be safe. After the sheriff left, Nathaniel turned to Soraya with concern. Perhaps we should postpone the wedding until they catch him. Soraya shook her head firmly. No, I won't let a man like Carter disrupt our lives any more than he already has. We'll be cautious, but the wedding will proceed as planned. Nathaniel smiled at her determination. You never cease to amaze me. That night, Soraya stayed at the Greaves mansion, following the tradition that the bride and groom shouldn't see each other the night before the wedding. She slept in what had been Nathaniel's childhood room, surrounded by books and mementos of his youth. Morning Star and the other Shoshone women stayed in guest rooms down the hall, their presence a comfort in the unfamiliar surroundings. Before retiring, Morning Star performed a small blessing ritual, burning sage and praying for protection and guidance from their ancestors. No vengeful drunk can stand against the spirits who watch over you, she assured Saria. Sleep peacefully, sister. Tomorrow you begin a new chapter of your story. Despite the reassurance, Soraya slept fitfully, dreaming of her sister and her lost village mixed with images of her new life with Nathaniel. In one vivid dream, she stood at a crossroads, looking back at her people and forward to an unknown future. A voice she recognized as her mother's whispered, "The path divides, but the heart remains whole." She woke with the words still echoing in her mind, feeling strangely at peace despite the threats that loomed in the background. The morning of the wedding brought a flurry of activity. Mrs. Peterson and several other women arrived to help Soraya prepare, exclaiming over the beautiful dress Edward had ordered, a creation of white silk with delicate beading that somehow managed to look both elegant and appropriate for Soraya's slender frame. Morning Star added her own touches, a beaded headpiece with eagle feathers and a necklace of polished stones that had belonged to her grandmother. Something old, something new, Mrs. Peterson remarked, admiring the blend of traditions. "You make a beautiful bride, Saraya. Nathaniel is a lucky man." When Saraya finally descended the grand staircase of the Greaves mansion, Edward was waiting. At the bottom to escort her to the garden. He paused, visibly moved by the sight of her. "You look radiant," he said with uncharacteristic emotion. "Nathaniel's mother would have been proud to call you daughter." Outside, guests had gathered under the canopy and around the stone circle. Saraya recognized faces from town mingled with farmers Nathaniel had worked with, and, to her joy, several children, including the Miller siblings. Sheriff Taylor and his deputies stood discreetly around the perimeter, watchful but unobtrusive. Nathaniel waited beneath the canopy, handsome in a new suit, his face lighting up when he saw Saraya. The love in his eyes banished any lingering doubts or fears she might have harbored. As Edward guided her down the path, the mixed congregation rose in respect. Some still looked uncertain about the blended ceremony, but none showed outright disapproval. Progress, Saraya thought, came in small steps as well as grand gestures. The Christian portion of the ceremony was conducted by the town's minister, who had initially been reluctant to participate, but had gradually warmed to the idea after several thoughtful conversations with Nathaniel. He spoke of love transcending differences and of God's presence in unexpected places. When it came time for the Shoshone blessing, Morning Star stepped forward. She carried the ceremonial blanket Saraya had woven, its patterns telling the story of two people from different worlds finding each other against all odds. "In the tradition of our people," Morning Star explained to the gathering, "the blanket represents the union of two lives, two spirits becoming one while remaining themselves." She wrapped the blanket around Saraya and Nathaniel's shoulders, binding them gently together. Saraya burned the sacred herbs in a small stone bowl, the fragrant smoke rising toward the clear blue sky, as Morning Star spoke words of blessing in the Shoshone language. The guests watched in respectful silence, many visibly moved by the beauty and simplicity of the ritual. Even Edward seemed touched, his usual stern expression softened by the evident joy on his son's face. As the ceremony concluded and the blanket was carefully folded to be kept as a family heirloom, Nathaniel and Saraya turned to face their community as husband and wife. The applause that greeted them was genuine and warm, a far cry from the suspicious stares that had followed them months before. The celebration that followed was lively and joyous. Tables laden with food and drink had been set up around the garden, and musicians played for those who wished to dance. Children ran between the tables, playing games and collecting flowers, while adults chatted in groups, the usual social barriers temporarily lowered by the festive atmosphere. Saraya was dancing with Nathaniel when Sheriff Taylor approached, his expression troubled. He beckoned them to a quiet corner of the garden. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said in a low voice, "but one of my men spotted Carter lurking near the property line. We tried to apprehend him, but he got away." Nathaniel's arm tightened protectively around Saraya. "Should we end the celebration early?" The sheriff shook his head. "I've doubled the guards, he won't get past them. But I wanted you to be aware." "Thank you," Saraya said calmly. "We appreciate your vigilance." After the sheriff moved away, Nathaniel looked at her with concern. "You don't seem worried." "I'm not," Saraya replied. "Not today. Today is for joy, not fear." Her confidence proved justified as the celebration continued without incident. As afternoon turned to evening, lanterns were lit throughout the garden, casting a magical glow over the gathering. Edward Greaves, who had maintained his dignity throughout the day, surprised everyone by asking Saraya for a dance. "I'm not very good at this," he admitted as they moved carefully around the makeshift dance floor. "Catherine, Nathaniel's mother, always complained I had no sense of rhythm." "You're doing fine," Saraya assured him, touched by the effort he was making. Edward cleared his throat. "I wanted to tell you, that is, I hope you know that I was wrong about you. About many things." "We all make mistakes," Saraya said gently. "What matters is that we learn from them." "Indeed," Edward nodded thoughtfully. "Catherine used to say something similar. You remind me of her sometimes. Your quiet strength, your compassion." It was the highest compliment he could have paid her, and Saraya accepted it with a grateful smile. As the evening progressed, guests began to depart, offering final congratulations and well wishes. The Shoshone women blessed the newlyweds once, more before taking their leave, Morning Star promising to visit again when she could. "Remember," she told Soraya, "your people live on through you, through the knowledge you keep and share. You are not alone on this new path." By the time the last guests had gone, leaving only family behind, Soraya and Nathaniel were both exhausted, but happy. They would spend their wedding night at the mansion before traveling to their land the next day to oversee the ongoing construction of their new home. Edward bid them good night with uncharacteristic warmth, embracing his son and, after a moment's hesitation, Soraya as well. "Be happy," he told them simply. "That's all that matters in the end." Alone at last in Nathaniel's childhood bedroom, now transformed with fresh flowers and new linens for the occasion, they held each other close, marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Mrs. Greaves," Nathaniel murmured, kissing her forehead. "How does it sound?" "Strange," Soraya admitted, "but good, though I'll always be Soraya of the Shoshone people too." "I wouldn't want it any other way," Nathaniel assured her. "Both names are part of who you are, who we are together." They fell asleep in each other's arms, the ceremonial blanket draped across the foot of their bed, a symbol of their union and the new life they had begun. Dawn was just breaking when a crash from downstairs jolted them awake. Nathaniel sat up, instantly alert. What was that? Another crash followed, accompanied by slurred shouting. "Greaves! Come out, you Indian-loving coward!" "Carter," Soraya whispered, fear gripping her. Heart for the first time since the threat had emerged, Nathaniel moved quickly, pulling on his clothes. "Stay here, lock the door behind me." "No," Soraya argued, already reaching for her dress. "We face this together." Before they could decide, more shouting echoed through the house, followed by Edward's voice, stern and commanding. "Get out of my house, Carter. The sheriff's men are right outside." A gunshot rang out, followed by a heavy thud. Nathaniel's face went white. Without another word, he rushed from the room, Soraya close behind him. They found Edward at the bottom of the grand staircase, one hand pressed to his shoulder where blood seeped through his nightshirt. Frank Carter stood in the entrance hall, a gun in his unsteady hand, his face contorted with drunken rage. "There you are," he snarled when he spotted Nathaniel and Soraya on the stairs. "The happy couple. You ruined me, made me a laughingstock. My wife left me, the bank took my ranch, and it's all because of you and your savage bride." "You ruined yourself, Frank," Nathaniel replied, trying to keep his voice calm as he slowly descended the stairs, keeping Soraya behind him. "No one else is to blame for your choices." Carter's bloodshot eyes narrowed. "Always so high and mighty. You Greaves men think you're better than the rest of us." He waved the gun erratically. "Not so mighty with a bullet in you, are you, old man?" Edward, despite his injury, remained defiant. "If you have any sense left in that alcohol-soaked brain of yours, Carter, you'll put that gun down now. My son is right. Your troubles are of your own making." "Shut up," Carter roared, aiming the gun at Edward again. "I'll finish what I started with you, then take care of these two." "No," Soraya cried, pushing past Nathaniel and rushing down the remaining stairs. "Enough blood has been shed. This solves nothing." Carter turned the gun toward her, his finger tightening on the trigger. "You're the root of it all. Should have let them sell you to the mines where you belong." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. As Carter prepared to fire, Edward lunged forward with unexpected strength, tackling the larger man. The gun went off, the bullet embedding itself in the ceiling as both men crashed to the floor. Nathaniel rushed to help his father, while Soraya grabbed a heavy vase from a nearby table and brought it down on Carter's head. The blow wasn't enough to knock him out, but it dazed him long enough for Nathaniel to wrestle the gun from his hand. The commotion finally alerted the sheriff's men outside, who burst through the door with weapons drawn. They quickly subdued Carter, who continued to shout threats and obscenities as they dragged him away. "Father, you're hurt," Nathaniel said, helping Edward to a chair. "We need to get the doctor." "It's just a graze," Edward insisted, though his face was pale with pain. He was too drunk to aim properly, thank God. Soraya was already examining the wound with practiced eyes. "It needs cleaning and bandaging, but the bullet only grazed the flesh. I have herbs that will prevent infection and help with the pain." Edward looked at her with newfound respect. "I believe I'll trust your expertise in this matter, my dear." While they waited for the doctor to arrive, Soraya cleaned and dressed Edward's wound with gentle efficiency. Nathaniel watched her work, his love and admiration evident in his eyes. "Some wedding night," he commented ruefully when she had finished. "One we won't forget, certainly," Soraya replied with a small smile. "But it's over now. Carter won't hurt anyone else." Edward, looking surprisingly comfortable despite his injury, shook his head. "To think I once shared some of that man's prejudices. It shames me now." "You changed," Soraya said simply. "He couldn't." "Thanks to you," Edward acknowledged. "Both of you. You made me see beyond my narrow views." The doctor arrived soon after, praising Soraya's treatment of the wound and confirming that no serious damage had been done. Sheriff Taylor also returned to report that Carter was securely locked up and facing serious charges that would keep him imprisoned for many years. "You folks have had enough excitement," the doctor declared when he had finished tending to Edward. "Mr. Greaves needs rest, and you two should try to salvage what's left of your wedding day." Despite the dramatic interruption, they decided to proceed with their plans to visit their land and the partially constructed house that would soon be their home. Edward insisted they go, promising to rest under the doctor's supervision. "Don't let Carter's madness cast a shadow over your beginning," he urged them. "Go, build your future." The ride to their land was quiet, both of them processing the morning's events. When they crested the familiar rise and saw the valley spread before them, however, the tension began to fade. The foundation of their house was complete, and the frame was beginning to take shape, a physical manifestation of the life they were building together. "Home," Nathaniel said simply as they stopped the wagon. "Home," Soraya echoed, the word rich, with meaning. They walked hand in hand through the meadow, inspecting the construction progress and planning where Soraya would plant her garden come spring. The stream gurgled peacefully nearby and birds sang in the cottonwood trees. It was hard to believe that just hours before they had faced violence and hatred. "We survived," Soraya said, as if reading his thoughts. "We'll always survive, as long as we're together." Nathaniel pulled her close. "When I saw Carter pointing that gun at you, I thought my heart would stop." "But it didn't," Soraya reminded him, "and neither did mine when I saw your father injured. We're stronger than fear, stronger than hate." They spread the ceremonial blanket on the grass beside the stream and sat together, watching clouds drift across the sky and birds soar on thermal currents. In this peaceful moment, the future stretched before them like the valley itself, wide open, full of possibility. "I want to build a school someday," Soraya said unexpectedly, "here on our land, a place where children from town and from the native settlements can learn together, where they can be taught to see beyond differences to the humanity they share." Nathaniel smiled at her vision. "A bridge between worlds." "Yes," she agreed, "because that's what we are, isn't it? You and me. Neither fully of one world nor the other, but something new. Something, I hope, better. We'll build it together," Nathaniel promised. "The house, the school, our life, everything." As the sun began its westward journey, they reluctantly prepared to return to town. Edward would need checking on, and there were still wedding gifts to sort through and thank you. Notes to write. Life with all its ordinary details and extraordinary moments continued. "I was thinking," Nathaniel said as they drove back toward Red Hollow, "about what you said earlier, about being Saria of the Shoshone people and also Mrs. Greaves." "Yes," she prompted when he hesitated. "What if our children could have both? Greaves as their surname, but also Shoshone names that honor your heritage, names that tell the world they belong to both traditions, both bloodlines." Soraya's eyes filled with tears at the thoughtfulness of his suggestion. "I would like that, very much. And you could teach them your language, your stories," Nathaniel continued, warming to the idea. "While I teach them about my world, they would be truly of both places, belonging fully to each." "Children of the bridge," Soraya murmured, imagining these future little ones with their mixed heritage and dual names. As they approached the outskirts of Red Hollow, they could see that news of the morning's drama had spread. People stood in small groups talking animatedly. When they spotted Nathaniel and Soraya's wagon, Many waved or called out in support. Word travels fast, Nathaniel observed. In any community, Soraya agreed. My people were the same. No secrets in a small village. They stopped first at the Greaves mansion to check on Edward, finding him resting comfortably under the watchful eye of Mrs. Peterson, who had appointed herself his nurse. You two should be on your honeymoon, not fussing over an old man, Edward grumbled, though his eyes were warm. I'm perfectly fine. We'll be staying at the ranch house tonight, Nathaniel told him. Close enough if you need anything, but giving us some privacy too. Good, good, Edward nodded approvingly. And tomorrow, you can show me the progress on your new house. I have some ideas about the roof design that might interest you. Soraya hid a smile at this evidence of Edward's continued evolution. From outright hostility to offering construction advice, it was a journey almost as remarkable as her own. That evening, as they settled into what would be their last night at the ranch house before moving to their new home once it was completed, Soraya felt a sense of completion. The circle that had begun with terror and despair on that auction block had transformed into something beautiful and hopeful. What are you thinking? Nathaniel asked as they sat on the familiar porch steps, watching stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. About prices, Soraya replied thoughtfully. About what things truly cost. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. Sounds philosophical for our wedding day. $500 in gold, Soraya said softly. That was the price you paid for my contract. But the true price was much higher. Your relationship with your father, your engagement to Elizabeth, your position in society. You risked everything. And gained everything that truly matters, Nathaniel finished for her, taking her hand. Some prices are worth paying, Soraya. Some gambles worth taking. And some bridges worth building, she added. No matter how difficult the terrain, they sat in companionable silence as night deepened around them. Two people from different worlds, who had found in each other something rare and precious, understanding, acceptance, and a love strong enough to withstand the prejudices of their time. In the months and years that followed, their bridge grew stronger. Their house in the valley became a home filled with books and music, and eventually the laughter of children with dual names and heritage. Edward Greaves became a doting grandfather, surprising everyone with his patience and playfulness. The school Soraya had envisioned became reality, first as a small class taught on their porch, then as a proper building where children of all backgrounds learned together. Some of Red Hollow's residents still kept their distance, clinging to old prejudices, but they were increasingly in the minority, and sometimes on quiet evenings when the children were asleep, Soraya would take out the ceremonial blanket and wrap it around herself and Nathaniel, remembering the words Morning Star had spoken at their wedding. Two lives, two spirits becoming one while remaining themselves. That was the true price of her name, Soraya realized, not the gold Nathaniel had paid on that fateful day, but the courage it took to remain herself while building a bridge to his world. It was a price she had paid willingly, just as he had paid the price of defying convention to build a bridge to hers. Together, they had created something new and beautiful on the foundation of those sacrifices, a family, a community, a future, where the boundaries between worlds began to blur and perhaps someday might disappear altogether. And in this they found the greatest wealth of all. The end.